Good afternoon to you. 306 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, John Daniel Davidson, senior editor over at the Federalist, on what the Democrats are doing. They're meddling in the election, everybody. It's kind of obvious at this point. John's going to run it down. John Lott will be here at 4 o'clock from the Crime Prevention Research Center. We'll talk about these shootings that the news media has been obsessing over the last few days. John will bring the facts to the conversation. And Tom Fitton is here from Judicial Watch. A lot to talk about with him, as we now know that Joe Biden used fake email addresses thousands of times while he was vice president of the United States. Why would you need to use fake email addresses to conduct the nation's business? The details ahead. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Always grateful for that. Yesterday, last we spoke, we were kind of wrapping up the ongoing news story of an apparent shooting that had taken place at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And it resolved with nobody going to the local hospital. Nobody was admitted to the local hospital, and they gave an all clear, and it seemed that there were no injuries or casualties to speak of as of the end of the program yesterday. Since then, we have learned quite a bit more, but I will argue we still haven't learned enough about what exactly went down yesterday at UNC. And I feel like the details here really matter. The New York Times, in their reporting today, they say a graduate student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill has been charged in the fatal shooting of one of his professors Monday, a killing that spread fear across the campus and forced an hours-long lockdown. The student, Tylee Key spelled Q-I, is 34 years old and was charged with first-degree murder and possession of a firearm on educational property in the killing of Ziji Yan, an associate professor in the Applied Physical Sciences Department, inside of a campus lab, according to the court documents. Mr. Key made a brief appearance in court Tuesday afternoon, was ordered held without bond until his next court appearance on September 18th. The lawyer who represented him didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. No motive was described in the court documents. Mr. Key is a doctoral student in applied physical sciences, and he was one of 3 graduate students in Professor Yan's research group and was a co-author of at least 2 research papers with him. In other words, he knew this guy pretty intimately, according to the group's website. Mr. Key joined the group in January of 2022, the website said. Professor Yan obtained his PhD in materials engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and then joined the UNC faculty in the Applied Physical Sciences Department in 2019, according to the website of the university. His research interests include a bunch of stuff that I don't understand, including optical trapping and manipulation, holography, microfluidics, and nanomaterials. Sounds like a smart guy that was just killed yesterday, apparently by his student. The chancellor of the university, Kevin Guskowitz, said Tuesday the university planned to ring the campus bell tower and observe a moment of silence today for their fallen colleague. Okay, so what about the murderer here, the alleged murderer? Mr. Key, they say, grew up in a small village in central China in the Henan province, according to a 2010 local media report. Okay, so we already know a detail about him, which is that he is a Chinese immigrant of some kind. Is he a Chinese foreign national? Did he ever become a U.S. citizen? What's so frustrating about all of the coverage today is nobody seems to want to know the answer to that question. If you were engaged in an act of journalism, if you were just going to get to the bottom of a story that captured the nation's attention for hours yesterday, wouldn't you want to know, is this guy a Chinese foreign national? Wouldn't that be a relevant detail in your reporting? The New York Times does say that he grew up in central China, according to a 2010 local media report that profiled him and his younger brother for achieving identical high scores on the country's national college entrance examination. His family relied on farming 6 acres as their only source of income. Who cares about any of this? The report also stated the family was worried about paying college tuition because Mr. Key's father suffered from liver disease and his mother had leg problems. Why is this piece so sympathetic to the murderer? Oh, he came from a hard-scrabble upbringing in central China. At a news conference Monday evening, Brian James, chief of police at UNC's Chapel Hill campus, said the police received a 911 call reporting that shots had been fired at the lab, Caudell Labs, on campus at about 1 p.m. Soon after, the university sent an alert locking down the campus, yada, yada, yada. The reporting here goes on to cite a bunch of students who were nervous and what they were doing and where they were hiding and how they were responding. So that's just some extra color to the piece. But fundamentally, one of the things that's escaped all of the coverage today, and I've been looking at all over the place, is this guy a Chinese foreign national? Just establish that for us. It seems like he is. He definitely grew up there. One of the details that leapt off the page at me yesterday is apparently he spent some time going to Wuhan University. He was educated in Wuhan, in addition. And there are UNC professors, you should know, who were involved and have been involved in that very dangerous gain-of-function research. There's a professor by the name of Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, whose name pops up for any of us who are interested in this topic all the time, where you take a virus and you make it more infectious and more deadly to human beings. And so while we were waiting for the name of the professor overnight, I couldn't help but wonder, a kid who went to the Wuhan University and is now being educated in the sciences at the University of North Carolina, who did he kill? And for what reason? You get suspicious. So again, there's not a lot of answers here, but I did want to offer an update for you because yesterday we were left with the hopeful impression that there were no casualties here, and now we find out that one professor did die due to gunshot wounds yesterday, apparently because this student killed him, murdered him. Meanwhile, Democrats reacted the way that you would expect them to react, which is whenever there's a crisis, you need to lose your liberty. It doesn't matter what the crisis is. Your liberty needs to be taken away from you. Eric Swalwell, just as our show was ending yesterday, 5:59 p.m., Eric Swalwell tweets, "Ban assault weapons, buy them all back, choose our kids over their killers," he writes. Now, let me break down this very stupid tweet, what he's saying here. First of all, now we know, with the benefit of the details coming out, that what looks to be a Chinese foreign national killed an Asian professor at the University of North Carolina, and Fang Fang's boyfriend is saying that Americans need to be disarmed as a result of all of that. That's part one of this. Part two is banning assault weapons, as he defines it, is something that Congress already did beginning in the 90s. It sunset in the early aughts. And guess what it did to crime in the country? Nothing. It didn't do anything to alleviate murders of any kind. In fact, almost everyone who dies by gunshots, most of them are suicides, but to the extent that there are homicides, they're usually handguns. Rifles have nothing to do with this. But of course, the left loves targeting rifles. They love it because they hate the Second Amendment. And of course, the purpose of the Second Amendment is for free people to be able to protect themselves, including from a tyrannical government. That's true. That's what the Second Amendment is for. It guarantees the other rights. That's why you have the Second Amendment, to protect the others. Now, another piece here. Eric Swalwell says, quote, "buy them all back." Correct me if I'm wrong. Your household gun, did you buy it from the government? What does he mean, buy them back? What, did the government sell them to you in the first place? How could the government buy them back from you? That's nonsensical. Buy them back. Eric Swalwell wants to give you a Subway gift card in exchange for your AR-15. That's what he's proposing here. Here, get a $5 footlong. But in exchange, give me your AR-15. Now, it is not what he's talking about when he says buy them all back, and he capitalized all. This is not a voluntary program he's suggesting here. This is gun confiscation. He's just saying, we're going to give you a little money to make it easier as we rob you of your liberty and your weapons and your ability to defend yourself. We're going to buy them, quote, all back. That is national gun confiscation. That's what Eric Swalwell is suggesting. So, look, just in summary, the guy's a tyrant. And he's the kind of person who will stand there or go on cable television or national TV and argue that it's his Republican opponents who are authoritarian and fascist. No, as always, it's this left-wing lunatic stuff. It's all projection. He wants to confiscate weapons as a result of an apparent Chinese foreign national killing a professor at the University of North Carolina. Oh, that's it. Disarm Americans. Great. John Lott will join us coming up at 4 o'clock. He's with the Crime Prevention Research Center, and we'll talk about that story. We'll also talk about the Jacksonville area shooting in Florida on Saturday. Remember, in that saga, that awful story, you had a man who tried at first to go to Edward Waters University. It is a black college in Jacksonville, Florida. And it's a Christian school. And when he went there, he encountered a security guard, and he decided not to go into the university, apparently, to wreak havoc there. Authorities are confident that he set out to kill people because of the color of their skin. This poisonous ideology of judging people on the basis of their skin color and thinking that you should target them for that reason, despicable stuff. And so he set out to go to a black college, Edward Waters University, encountered security, decided against it. What does that tell you? It should tell you something, shouldn't it? That people who are protected are less likely to be victimized. And that includes if you protect your own family. So he veers away from the school and goes to a nearby Dollar General, and he kills 3 black Americans, kills 1 woman outside in the parking lot, kills 2 men inside. Now, in the wake of that tragedy, you had mourning in Jacksonville. You had a prayer vigil. You had the governor of Florida arrive to be a part of it, to offer his condolences and to offer the resources of the state. He's bringing taxpayer money with him, disaster relief funding, in order to address the needs of the community there in Jacksonville in the wake of this. And what is the left doing with this? The left, in of course, yet another case of projection on their part, is blaming DeSantis for the deaths. They're saying DeSantis is responsible for what that psycho did in Jacksonville. These people are unserious. They're totally unserious. They view bloodshed as an opportunity. Bloodshed to the left is an opportunity. Always. These disasters, the chaos, these crises, they, in the words of Rahm Emanuel, never let them go to waste. They will use them for their own cruel ends, and that means demonizing Ron DeSantis, the guy who's standing up for the people of Florida, the guy who was in there in a New York minute. He was there in a moment to stand up for Jacksonville. They're attacking him. They're casting him as bad as the gunman. It's totally insane. I've got some of the details on that ahead. This is a mainstream Democrat view. That's how insane their party has become. And I'll share some of it with you in a moment. Also, John Lott, like I said, coming up at 4 o'clock. All right, let's see here. One quick thing I want to address. There's a number of people were calling in to say that there was a Fox News screen grab going around the internet identifying the UNC shooter as a mostly white Asian male. Did you see this at all yesterday? I've seen a lot of friends and family members, different people were sharing this all over social media. It isn't real. It isn't real. I as soon as I saw the screen grab, I said, man, that font does not look like what Fox typically uses. And sure enough, it's a fake screen grab that's been getting around. There's some crazy stuff out there. But that wasn't authentic. So it was worth mentioning. I know I got a number of calls on that. People wanted to point that out. And by the way, if that's what it actually said, I would have been all over it. But no, that is not something that actually happened. You know what's good at checking that is the Twitter community notes feature. There's a lot of the whole fact-checking industry is basically one big scam. It's like it's all about laundering left-wing talking points and putting down the actual truth. But the community notes feature that Elon Musk has for Twitter, now X, seems to be a pretty efficient system. and it doesn't rob you of the ability to see the original tweet. It includes a bunch of context underneath. So far, I've found it to be pretty useful. So hopefully that continues. It's a community feature where people vote on whether or not to let other people see that note, to add some context to what's getting around. And an example of that is that screen grab, the screen grab of a fake Fox News image, and right underneath it, it clarified that this is not real. It's been altered. Let's see here. Let's take a phone call from Adrian calling in from Albuquerque. Adrian on line 1. Good to have you back. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince.
Hey, sir.
Vince, in regards to the shooter, obviously, in this country, we've got a big problem with the breakdown of the American family.
Yes.
I wonder if the shooter had a father in the home, or if when he was growing up, there was a father in his life. And my other comment that I wanted to make is... You're talking...
I'm sorry. I've been talking about two different people, so I assume you're talking about Jacksonville.
Yes, my apologies. Yes, Jacksonville, Florida.
Yes. Okay, and your other question?
It'll be kind of interesting. Well, and then the other comment that I was going to make is it's just really sad and pathetic that the left always has to, regarding their blaming Ron DeSantis, Governor DeSantis, for the shooting. They'll just do anything to deflect from Joe Biden and all his problems. And really sadly, this shooter in whenever someone is committing a crime like this, I think it's safe that we can say that they're just a piece of Biden.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, I'll tell you what, Adrian, to answer your first question, apparently the shooter in Jacksonville did have some kind of relationship with his father. There's a CNN report that says that authorities say that there was a 911 call made by his father. And this was basically after the gunfire started, they report. The gunman texted his father and told him to go into his room, and that's where the father found a will and a suicide note. And then the father then called 911 and told them what was going on. So I don't know what the relationship is like, but you're asking the right questions because we have a country where we have this epidemic of fatherlessness, and so many of the social ills we're encountering are directly connected to that very thing. So you're asking the right questions. Unfortunately, by and large, the media isn't. Which is, of course, typical. All right, coming up, we've got a lot more for you. We're going to be joined by John Daniel Davidson about how the elections are truly trying, in the middle, really, of rigging the next election. The details ahead. Good afternoon to you. It is 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we'll be joined by John Lott. He's the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. He always digs into the actual data, the facts around crime in our country, in the ways the left, of course, is constantly lying to you. John has all of that ahead for us at 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock, Tom Fitton will be with us from Judicial Watch, as Joe Biden has been caught using a fake email address thousands of times to, you know what he's doing. He's enriching his family at your expense. That's all ahead. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Democrats aren't interfering in the 2024 election with this Trump trial. They're blatantly rigging it. That would be the 2024 election, and that would be the headline in the Federalist today from John Daniel Davidson, a senior editor there. He's our next guest. John, great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Just give me the rundown here. We obviously got some news yesterday on what's going to happen beginning next year in early March. Trump has to go to trial now, and it just so happens that March 4th date is the day before Super Tuesday. What's going on?
What a coincidence. Can you imagine it? Man, this federal judge picked March 4th as the day to start Trump's bogus trial, this sort of show trial. This is the one that's related to January 6th charges that Trump engaged in some sort of seditious conspiracy by telling people to peacefully protest at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, brought by special counsel Jack Smith. Now, I argue that it's no accident that they chose March 4th, the day before Super Tuesday, not just to harm Trump's chances in the election and hurt his campaign and distract him, but also to set up a scenario whereby if Trump wins the primary, if he becomes the GOP nominee, he'll be convicted over the summer, most likely by a D.C. jury, a district that went 92% for Joe Biden. Of course, any jury in D.C. is going to convict Trump on any charges. And that will set blue states and counties and municipalities up to use this 14th Amendment argument to strike Trump from the ballot, throwing the election into chaos just months before Election Day.
Yes, and that seems to be the point. March 4th is the one that they really want because Fani Willis also wants that to be the beginning of her trial in Georgia. Everybody wants March 4th. It's very interesting they want that date in particular.
It's a big day. It's a big day, March 4th. I guess prosecutors think it's a good omen to have their trials start on March 4th, and biased, politically compromised judges, at least the federal judge in D.C., would seem to agree.
Yeah, and I was saying yesterday, and I've been saying, that you'd have to be a moron not to recognize the timing here. They keep alleging that this all occurred either in late 2020 or early 2021, the substance, to the extent that you can call it that, of any of the allegations here. And yet the indictments are being handed down now, and the trials are set to begin in the beginning of 2024. Who else would be subjected to this kind of timeline, if not a candidate for president of the United States who's being targeted by his political opponents?
And only a Republican candidate, mind you. They would never dream of doing this to a Democrat. No, to your point, there's a whole bunch of January 6th defendants who have not had a trial date set yet, who have been rotting in federal prison for years now. But somehow Trump is going to get an 8-month fast-tracked trial that just so happens to coincide with the beginning of the 2024 election cycle. And we're all just supposed to pretend this is normal. The point is, it's not normal. And Democrats are not even trying to hide it at this point. It's out. You're meant to notice, right? You're meant to notice that there's a two-tiered justice system and that Trump is being treated differently, and that the whole process is politicized.
Is there, in your view, John Daniel Davidson, is there a correlation between this and how poorly Biden's presidency has been going? Is the intensity of their effort to try and smear Trump related to Biden's failures?
I think it helps to distract the public from the massive failures, sort of one after another, of the Biden administration. But it's also just a naked exercise in power.
Yes.
The left has taken control of every major institution in this country, including the Department of Justice, including much of the federal judiciary. And this is an exercise in demonstrating the power that they have over the political process. And that's why I say that we are meant to notice. It's not just about Trump. It's about sending a message to all Americans that if you commit the crime that Trump committed, which the real crime Trump committed was winning in 2016. If you commit that crime, in other words, if you go against the establishment, if you try to dismantle the permanent regime in Washington, D.C., then you will become a target, and your erstwhile First Amendment and other constitutional protections will become criminalized, and you'll end up in court just like Trump.
And they have a hyperventilating left-wing media that's also captured by the left. That is breathing life into every little granular update in this saga and making it seem like it's the biggest scandal our country's ever faced.
And pretending that it's legitimate. I think it's a pointless exercise in doing a legal analysis of the charges and digging into the laws that federal prosecutors say Trump violated. It's ridiculous when you actually look at it. This is First Amendment protected free speech that Trump was engaging in, legal efforts to challenge election results in a handful of states that had really close and sometimes really shady elections in 2020. And there is no point in pretending, like the mainstream corporate media does, that these are legitimate charges. These are not. This is a show trial. It's commie nonsense.
Okay, so the answer on the right, by and large, now obviously Trump's answer is to say that he's being targeted, as you're pointing out, and as I've been pointing out, he's being targeted and persecuted, and he's always been saying they're trying to, I'm only standing in the way. They're really coming after you, and boy, there's a lot of evidence for that too. But everyone else, besides Trump, the guy who's being targeted here, the right seems to just kind of be making the defense like, well, no, he isn't guilty of this, and it's First Amendment protected speech, and stop hassling him. But it seems to me that it may be worth going on a little bit more offense here with these prosecutors and say, look, what's going to happen here is we're going to either use the power we have or we're going to accrue this power, and we are going after you for breaking the law, for violating the public trust, for misusing your positions in power to hurt someone and trample on their constitutional rights. Is there an appetite for this?
Well, there better be, otherwise the republic is finished. Look, what the left has done to these institutions and the way it has accrued power and has gone about wielding that power in a tyrannical way, it has to be stopped. They're not going to stop on their own. So until Republicans, attorneys general get the appetite in red states to indict Merrick Garland, to indict President Biden, to indict, Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, until we start sort of doing to them what they do to us, they won't stop. We have to impose a cost on them.
Yes.
But as you say, just arguing on Twitter or whatever, like, that Trump didn't do anything wrong, that's not going to cut it.
Right.
You have to make them feel pain.
But the one distinction I will make, though, is that this is not low. This is not frivolous. Like, actually going after these people for violating the public trust, violating laws, trampling constitutional rights is a legitimate exercise in power rather than what the left is doing. I often hear people on the right say, well, the right should be doing exactly what the left is doing. Not quite. The left is being deceitful in its pursuits. The right should still be honest.
I agree. I agree that there's more, definitely a legitimate cause to bring charges and to bring for House Republicans to bring an impeachment inquiry forward for not just for members of the cabinet, but for President Biden. And if they don't do that, if they balk at the last minute, then it's over. Then the game's up. Then Democrats know that the power that Republicans have at their disposal will never actually be used. And so there's nothing to restrain the left. There's nothing to stop Democrats from pushing forward.
I mean, conventionally in Washington, what typically happens is Republicans will try and throw out some red meat to sort of calm the base down, and then they won't, and then kind of give the appearance of action. And if an impeachment proceeding in particular is going to ever get started, normally they wouldn't want to delay it. Like, they wouldn't want to start it getting closer to the general election because they're concerned this will blow up in their faces and could result in Biden getting another term in office. So my view is if they're going to do it and if that's their concern, they should get started right now, no?
No, that's absolutely right. They needed to get started a couple months ago, but they actually absolutely have to get started now as we move out of summer into the fall. They need to get this underway. There's mountains of more evidence that Joe Biden engaged in criminal conspiracies and corrupt bribery schemes with foreign nationals than there ever was that Trump did anything wrong while he was in office, for which, the Democrats didn't hesitate to impeach him for a phone call, inquiring about the very thing that we now know was happening, that Biden was taking bribes from Ukraine. So
again, you're emphasizing today that there is quite obviously a Democratic effort to rig the next election underway. And it seems to me that it's multifaceted. There's a lot of elements to it because there's a lot of institutions involved, whether it's the media and its credulity towards certain storylines, its willingness to suppress others, a la Hunter Biden, the trying to get Trump taken off the ballot to rob voters of the ability to even render a judgment. That's talk about anti-democratic. And the other piece is my suspicion has been one of the things that Democrats are doing right now is they're smearing Trump and they're so obviously persecuting him that it makes it much more likely that he will be the nominee because Republicans will rally to his defense, as we've seen happen. And they are of the opinion that whatever they did in 2020 by, propping up a guy who barely can walk upstairs, they think they can do it again against Trump because they have some evidence in the past. Do you think that's right?
I think that's a fair analysis. Watch out for those resurgent COVID restrictions, lockdowns, masks, extraordinary polling rules ahead of the primary and the general election season. We're going to see COVID come back in a big way because it worked for the Democrats last time to use that as a pretext to change how we do our elections. And I would not be surprised in the least if they try to do it again.
Do you detect that people are waking up to this at all? I saw quite a bit of reaction to Trump's arrest and mugshot this past week in Georgia. A lot of social media sharing of, in particular, Black Americans rallying to Trump's defense. I don't know if that's indicative of a broader trend, but do you think Americans are waking up to some of this?
I think that a lot of Americans are noticing the double standard of justice that we have in this country, one for Democrats and one for Republicans, and especially a separate one for Trump. And I think that resonates with Americans who have had dealings with the justice system and who do feel that it's kind of a two-tiered system and that it's not, people aren't always treated fairly or equally. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised at all to see people responding and maybe, sort of coming around to see some of the things that some of us have been decrying for a long time. Something like a mugshot is really a visceral, visual example of pervasive rot in our justice system. And I think that will ultimately redound electorally to Trump's advantage. Now, whether or not, that only matters to the extent that we have a free and fair election, which is very much in question.
Yeah, that has to happen. And then finally, I'm looking at, it wasn't just Trump that's being targeted. It's certainly in all of these prosecutions, a lot of officials and people who've been close to Trump or around him or have ever supported him are being targeted. Among those is a person called Harrison Floyd. He was the leader of Black Voices for Trump. And this past Friday, he is the only person who was denied bail and is now sitting in jail. He's one of the 18 co-defendants alongside former President Trump. And Breitbart News rightly points out that Fulton County is holding him as a political prisoner right now as we mark the 60th anniversary of Martin Luther King's March on Washington. Martin Luther King also famously once held in that Fulton County jail. And once again, Democrats have turned a black man into a political prisoner in 2023.
I think that's a fair analysis. It's a fair statement. How else can you parse it? This is the crimes, quote unquote, these people are accused of are political speech. These are questions that are decided in this country or used to be decided by politics, not by the criminal justice system. And you can't just decide that because some people disagree with you or they disagree with the entire corporate media that they've somehow now committed a crime. That's absurd. It's not, we talk about how, that's Banana Republic nonsense. It's not Banana Republic nonsense. It's communist dictator nonsense. This is the kind of stuff that the Soviet Union did. This is the kind of stuff that still goes on in communist countries like China. And it's happening here right underneath our noses. And as I say, the Democrats aren't even trying to hide it.
And in all of those regimes, they always have, dutiful little lickspittles who justify all of it. And we see that in the media constantly.
Yep.
John Daniel Davidson, thank you very much for keeping your eyes open and for sharing your thoughts with us today, sir. Yeah, I got to give credit to Joel Pollack, great writer over at Breitbart News. He points out today that Joe Biden marked the 60th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington yesterday, as authorities in Democrat-run Fulton County, Georgia, are detaining a black man who has been described as a, quote, political prisoner. As Breitbart News reported, Black Voices for Trump leader Harrison Floyd was denied bail on Friday after turning himself in to face several charges as one of 18 co-defendants with former President Donald Trump. Many Trump supporters feel that Trump and his co-defendants, including several lawyers, are political prisoners. That's because they are, since they appear to have committed no crimes other than being associated with Trump's 2020 election challenges. It's not a crime. Not a crime, but they've decided to criminalize dissent, criminalize the political process, criminalize their political opponents, these Democrats. Floyd is one of two black co-defendants and the only one who is denied bail after the judge deemed him a flight risk because he already faces charges for allegedly assaulting an FBI agent who came to his home in Maryland. I'm sure there's a lot more to that story, too. In addition, Floyd is not being represented by a lawyer because he says it's too expensive, but he is reportedly not poor enough to qualify for a public defender. Therefore, he is defending himself. The Hill reporting on Saturday, Floyd represented himself and was the only one of the case's 19 defendants not to organize a bond agreement with state prosecutors before turning himself in. He told the judge, Emily Richardson, that legal counsel was too expensive. It cost between $40,000 and $100,000. That sounds like a penalty enough, doesn't it? Quote, "I can't put my family in that kind of debt," he said. Yeah. Breitbart News reports points out the early civil rights movement began by fighting for the rights of black defendants in Democrat-run jurisdictions in the South. who were often denied due process rights. And here we go again with these Democrats. Coming up, John Lott is going to join us from the Crime Prevention Research Center. We'll talk to him about the left's latest efforts to take your guns away because of the actions of an apparent Chinese foreign national murdering a professor at the University of North Carolina. It's all ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.